Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Pastrnak sent it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Poitras right in on goal. He scores. Oh my! What a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pastrnak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score!
The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pastrnak is there. He scores! David Pastrnak wins it for Boston.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I will be your host for today's episode. I am Maria from Watertown. We have quite a bit to talk about, but before we start our Set the Table segment, I want to welcome in my lovely co-host, Karoline with a K. How are you this happy Monday, my friend?
I am surviving. I am upright. It's definitely a Monday, so we'll see how today's recording goes.
Well, it's a beautiful Monday in New England because not only do we have the Bruins getting ready to officially start their season on Wednesday against the Washington Capitals, we had a huge victory by our New England Patriots against the no longer undefeated Buffalo Bills. And the New York Yankees had their asses kicked over the weekend. So it's a very happy Monday in New England. But be that as it may, we're here to talk about hockey. And we have quite a bit to dive into today.
Mm-hmm.
And today we'll be discussing the final roster cuts and the decisions that were made and whether or not we have any surprises, disappointments. I want to get your thoughts on players that you may be watching this season specifically, what our realistic expectations are for this team, perhaps some predictions for the Bruins for the upcoming season, and some big news that was announced by the Boston Bruins organization not too long ago. So before we get into that, we'll take our little spin around the rink because there were some couple of interesting happenings, and I'm sure we're a little late to the party having this conversation, but there were a couple of games recently between the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning that turned very, very ugly, I think, for preseason games. I'm all for spice it up, boys. But in one of the games, Brandon Hagel seemed to be a bit of a target. And I think there's some underlying history there between that player and Ekblad in terms of, a hit that Hagel laid out on Barkov that, got him suspended. It's just been a shit show. But AJ Greer went after Hagel.
Bruins legend, AJ Greer.
And I think, he got a 10-minute game misconduct. He was fined. But, there was a sucker punch that went to Hagel's head. And whatever the differences of opinion are between your team or whatever retribution you're trying to get on a player, targeting anybody's head is shit in my book. Absolute shit in my book. And, Brandon Hagel left the game, clearly sustained some kind of injury. And, this is the kind of thing while, I think the league wants to encourage rivalries. I don't think this is the way and the manner in which you want to encourage those rivalries. I think there was in one preseason game, they legit ran out of room in the penalty box. And while
there were more players in the box than on the bench.
Right. And while it might be, somewhat entertaining to those of us who, are watching and reading about this stuff, when you hear about guys targeting another guy's head, I'm sorry. You deserve to get your ass kicked. So, AJ, now, during the regular season, what do you think is going to happen? Somebody's going to go after Greer when they play their next regular season game. So I'm not sure. I think that's taking a rivalry a little bit too far.
Yeah. And I heard a really interesting point from, of all people, Steve Dangle, as a Bruins fan, quoting something from him, it has to be pretty significant for me to agree with him and take anything he says seriously. But the one point that he made was that, head injuries and this situation is truly not being taken seriously by the league at all. Because at the end of the day, think about the cost, right? Brandon Hagel, he has had concussion issues in the past. He's missed games because of head injuries. And this cost AJ Greer all of $2,500. But
change.
To quote Steve Dangle, but Greer got a roster spot out of the deal. Because let's be honest, AJ Greer, he won the Stanley Cup last season. He and his line mates were really critical at a very important point in the series for his team. I'm not denying that he and his line mates stepped up when they needed to, and they did the job that they needed to in that time. But he is a replaceable hockey talent. He is, I wouldn't even call him a jag, because at least those have a consistent purpose. He doesn't even have any of that to offer. And so for $2,500, he goes and takes down someone who probably is more replaceable on a team in Hagel. And for someone with Greer's talent level, probably was really trying to make sure he landed a consistent job for this season, and he has. So until the league genuinely, truly takes head injuries, CTE seriously, $5,000, even for the lowest paid player in the NHL, is nothing. But to end your career because you've had too many concussions, that's not the same cost in at all. So
no, I agree with you. I think we've talked about this before. There are many of us that don't believe that the league takes these hits seriously in any way, shape, or form. Because if they did, they would have sent a clear-cut message. The Department of Player Safety would have sent by now a clear-cut message. So we're going to continue seeing these types of hits. And now AJ Greer has likely put a target on his own back. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they get down to the nitty-gritty of a regular season game between these two teams, and what happens, what shenanigans unfolds during those games.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to talk about that. The other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is the NHL writing staff every season does their predictions, which they have done on their website. Everyone can go and read it on NHL.com. And what I found very interesting is not one staff writer has the Boston Bruins even anywhere near a wild card spot, which I found a little bit kind of not shocking, a little bit surprising, and a little bit like I was just a little surprised that not even one writer had them even sniffing a wild card spot.
I'm glad that they didn't. And I'll tell you why. I want to see the hunger, the anger, the pissed off attitude to continue from what we saw in preseason into the new season for the Bruins. I think that one of the best things for them to see, especially all of the, established returners, is to see the fact that their name has been omitted from preseason, predictions of any kind. Now, keep in mind, for the most part, it's a crapshoot. You might as well just go to Vegas and place a bet, because
I know
you never know what's going to happen.
It's a regular exercise that they do on a yearly basis, right? But and again, you can't take into account that who's going to get injured, when the injuries occur,
right?
Blah 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 blah.
But the fact that it's almost as if no one is talking about Boston, that lack of even consideration, hopefully sends a message to them, and it lights a fire under their asses, that it will get them to work that much harder to say, you think that we aren't capable of this? We're going to prove you wrong. And I hope that's the case, because I think a lot of what we saw in the preseason was a combination of that attitude, right? We talked a little bit about that, how, the returners are coming back really pissed off at how the season ended. They want to make it right. And with all of these new folks coming onto the team, they had a lot of hunger and energy to make the team. Okay. But as we have seen, and as we will discuss, even though the final roster is kind of quote unquote set, I think we can all agree that the bottom six is kind of mushy, right? So it's not super firmed up. At least that bottom line is not super firmed up. So I think, we're going to be seeing guys in that half of the roster, and a lot of guys in Providence fighting to make it back on. And so that's going to breed, I think, a lot of energy in this team. And then that's kind of the cherry on top, or the salt in the wound, right? It's, okay, we're going to prove you wrong. We all have something that we can be pissed off at, that we can coalesce around and fight for. And I think that, again, is the best thing that could have happened to the Bruins before the season starts.
I agree with you. Yeah, and I keep saying pissed off. I hope they've gotten past the being pissed off, right? Because sometimes that backfires when you're pissed off.
Sure.
The determination to say we are not going to have another season as we did last season.
Right.
So that is a good segue leading into what we're going to talk about, which is the final roster cuts, which were announced on Sunday, October 5th. We are recording on October 6th, which is Monday. Final roster cuts were announced by the Bruins organization on Sunday, October 5th. We are going to discuss those cuts and those players who were put on waivers. One in particular who I'm hoping it doesn't backfire on the Boston Bruins, because they really had no alternative, but we'll get to that. But before we dive into all things Bruins, we'll take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Hey Bruins fans, love the pod? Well, here's an opportunity to join the team. Become a friend of the pod on Patreon and unlock more Bruins content, merch perks, and the community we've built with diehard fans like you. For just $3 a month, join Gallery of the Gods. Get ad-free episodes, sticker swag, and a discount in the merch shop. Or go full legend with the Black and Gold tier. Bonus content, virtual watch parties, more swag, and full access to our Substack. No matter the tier, you're in the room with us. Tap the link in the show notes and take your spot on the bench. Okay, we're back. All right. So, my friend, final roster cuts.
Yes.
Okay. The players that were cut on Sunday were Jonathan Aspero, Blumel, Michael DiPietro, and Alex Steves, all who were placed on waivers for the purpose of getting them assigned to Providence.
Yeah.
Matt Poitras will report to Providence training camp. Now, I want to start with Matt Poitras because our last pod, we did talk about this player a bit, and I expressed my concerns in terms of him needing more time, development, in order to play with the big boys. I think he was given, he was given the same opportunities as all of these other young players were provided right up until the final preseason game against the New York Rangers. And while Matt Poitras played well in that game and did create offense, I had no issue with him being sent down to Providence. I don't think this young man is ready for a regular recurring role yet. I just don't think that he is strong enough yet to sustain the pounding that he would likely take shift after shift.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a tricky one because, again, I think he's up against not only himself, but the competition continues to evolve around him, right? It's not just that he has to work really hard. He can do everything he could possibly do, but he can't control what everyone else is doing and what the Bruins main organization needs at any given time. I mean, I think the fact remains that he is still not the best skater. So he's really easy to bump off the puck. He is a smaller guy. And by smaller, I mean, he's not like, Marchand size. But he then needs to overcompensate for that by, being an incredibly fast skater and a solid skater who can, evade some of these guys. And when you are that talented of a player in general, you're going to be targeted, right? They're going to do anything and everything they can to stop you. And that's just kind of something that's a little bit disappointing to see after all of these years already. I mean, I don't know what's going on in Providence in terms of his development. Who knows, right? Are they mishandling his development? Is he just not picking it up? Is he who knows where the fault lies? But I think that him being sent down to Providence is not a surprise at all.
No. I think that was kind of, I don't want to say easy to predict, but you could somewhat see the writing on the wall there. And, it's fine. There's no concern about him getting picked up or anything because been there, done that. So assigning him to Providence was, I would think, a likely, relatively easy decision for the organization to make. Now, the remaining players who were placed on waivers, the biggest concern right now is Michael DiPietro, who is a goalie. And I did a little sleuthing today on the social medias, and there is still, Michael DiPietro hasn't fully cleared yet, and there's still a concern that there's a team out there that has consideration in picking him up on waivers, and that team is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, they've got a lot of question marks right now just because of the sudden potential temporary departure of one of their main goaltenders.
Right.
So, yeah.
And you brought in James Reimer for a PTO. And if you're looking at that and you see this kid dangling out here on waivers,
right.
Honestly, it's somewhat of a kind of no-brainer situation for me. Why wouldn't you pick him up? But I don't understand all the waiver intricacies and, if they pick him up. I mean, he could likely make his way back to the Bruins
Right.
organization, but I think they were aware of that risk, why the organization wanted to take that risk. I don't know.
Well, and I think we've seen this particular strategy, not just by the Bruins, but other NHL teams in the past, where teams will wait until as late as possible to put some of their more valuable or desirable players on waivers because maybe other teams have already snapped up who they need. So, for example, I did find this kind of funny. If you recall, during free agency, Brandon Bussey actually voluntarily left Boston. He signed a deal with Florida. He was at camp. They put him on waivers a couple of days ago, and Carolina snapped him up.
Correct.
So he didn't even get to spend
Yeah.
like much time at all
And,
under
yep,
the Florida
in the Sunshine State.
organization. So that's kind of the idea, is anybody who's really needing a goalie, let's say in this case, it's not a surprise then that they waited until yesterday to put him on waivers, because I think the idea is, you know what, it's Monday today. The season starts this week. We have to be cap compliant, very shortly. We need to just temporarily not be thinking about all that other stuff right now. We need to shift our focus to who's going to show up, for opening day, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of my take, is that's what the strategy was. And if they had put him on waivers last week, right, when they were putting a whole bunch of guys on, he probably would have ended up in Carolina.
Well, that's likely why they waited until the 11th hour, and maybe they misjudged, the market, because, everything that I had been reading and, seeing come across my X feed was that, he should clear. Most teams have their goaltending situation locked up. And so maybe there's a deeper concern in Toronto about when their regular goalie will be coming back. So we'll see what happens between now and the official start of the season on Tuesday, October 7th, right? The league kicks off
Wednesday,
October.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but of the remaining players that were placed on waivers, so Jonathan Aspero, Lumel, and Alex Steves. Were you surprised?
I was disappointed. I wouldn't say I was surprised, because whatever, but I was disappointed that they sent Blumel down. This is a kid who he signed a 1-year deal with Boston. He's making $800 some odd $1,000, whatever, a little bit above league minimum. He came from Dallas. I certainly hadn't really known him beforehand, but I noticed him during preseason. In fact, I had to kind of do a double take and think, wait, was he one of the rookies? Because I don't know who he is. I didn't know who he was.
Right.
And he's not. So that's obviously why he's got to go through waivers and things. Blumel is a right wing. And if you then kind of take a step back and you look at then who the Bruins decided to keep, it does not offer any additional clarity on my part because, you've got someone like Johnny Beecher who is, splits his time between center and right wing. I mean, and he's got a spot on the roster right now. So I don't know. That was the one that
I
was
don't
kind of
either.
hoping was-
And in my view, Beecher didn't do enough during. I didn't see enough out of him during training
Yeah.
camp to think, okay, that this player is going to be any different than the player we saw
yeah.
last season. But
Well, and then
but
thinking
Beecher
about,
he's a center.
Yep.
He apparently, he does do a good job in the faceoff draws and penalty killing. So
yeah, that's likely what helped him keep his job. I mean, at the end of the day, his ability to play center and right wing, that kind of flexibility, I think also helped him because there are a lot of centers right now, and in order to make people fit, maybe the coaching staff opted to try and select players who were good enough, quote unquote, could contribute enough in a multitude of ways. And if Blumel could only play right wing, that limits him. But I think he certainly showed enough that, as I alluded to earlier, that kind of mushy bottom of this roster.
We have a roster of fourth line. I mean, after the first two lines, and
Yeah.
I'm being maybe generous with that second line too. We have a bunch of fourth liners, right? And so maybe hence why the NHL writing staff is not giving a lot of respect to the Boston Bruins in their predictions. But it's very interesting in talking about Blumel because I have the Bruins roster up in front of me right now. Now, the waiver announcement came out on Sunday, and I'm looking at the Bruins roster right now, and Blumel is listed on the Bruins roster right now, along with Jeffrey Veal. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but I will say that as we got on the air to start our recording, Scott McLaughlin of WEEI and the Skate Pod tweeted out the Bruins practice lines for today in preparing for their opening game against the Washington Capitals. And not surprisingly, first line is Kiki Lindholm Pasta. Second line, Zaka Middlestat Arvidsson. Third line, Janot, Minton, and Isamont. And then the fourth line, who's practicing, Hustadinov, Karoline, Kastelik, Beecher, and Veal. Defensive pairings, Lorai McAvoy, Lindholm Peak, Zadorov, Yukiharu, and with Harris as the extra.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Your thoughts, concerns?
What's his name? Viel? What did he show?
I don't know.
All I saw of him last season, and that was all of 2 games, was him coming up, thinking he was someone like Kastelik, but completely misreading the situation and starting fights and creating penalties when it was not appropriate to do so. And I'm stunned because I didn't otherwise notice him at all in any of these games.
Well, and I'll say too, I didn't think Kastelik had a great preseason either.
Yeah.
I mean, he showed some balls in the game against the Rangers, going toe to toe with trying to go toe to toe with Matt Rempe. But then I have to question, like, dude, what are you doing? You missed a lot of the tail end of the season because you were concussed. But be that as it may, Yeah. So, that fourth line, or if you want to call it the fourth line, I don't even know what we're going to call it, seems to be in flux, and a work in progress. And honestly, Janot, Minton, and Esimont, I don't know. I think that's what's troubling me, and it gives you pause for concern, right?
Yeah.
To figure out, like, where are we going to go with these bottom six guys after our top two lines? Like,
Yeah.
and that's likely why, and we'll give our predictions at the end. I have my own prediction that people probably aren't going to love, but I mean, what are your expectations?
Yeah. I mean, look, preseason is its own thing. It's just as different as playoffs is from the regular season. But I think there's still value in taking what you've seen, especially if by the end there's good representation of what your ultimate final roster is going to look like. And as we kind of predicted and hoped, that final game on Saturday was the dress rehearsal. In my opinion, I was pleased to see that that's what happened, because it's something that, again, we've talked about needing to be a thing.
Right. And if you told me they could get 3 goals by Igor Shesterkin with that, I'd say, okay.
Right.
I mean,
after being down too. So
the fourth goal was an empty net goal, but to put 3 up on Shesterkin.
Yeah. I think if this Bruins team, and especially the Bruins leadership, can continue to motivate and maintain the players' appropriate attitude and just level-headed thinking while they're out on the ice, if they can continue that kind of attitude, I'm going to be pleased, I think. You don't need to have every guy be awesome, right? We've talked plenty of times about how everybody has a job. We may not see right now what everyone's jobs are. It might not be very, very clear, but I appreciated them having that grit, that perseverance. All of the games had that, whether it was primarily AHL guys, on those road games, or the games with, our veterans. Everyone seemed to have the same kind of attitude and approach to the game in front of them. And that, at this point, that is all I'm asking for. Do not give up after a mistake. Obviously, please don't make a ton of idiotic mistakes. But keep going. When you're down, keep going. The game's not over, So,
well,
that's
I was encouraged by what I saw in the Rangers game, and the fact that they seem to understand, and part of their strategy going into the season is, they've got to generate more offense from their back end. And so that first goal that was scored by Zadorov, I thought was a thing of beauty, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone expected, or the Rangers did not expect, to have Zadorov, blowing in from the point there and blistering that shot by Shesterkin. So, I think that is going to be critically important to the Bruins this season. And, getting off to a quick start for the month of October is also going to be critical, because their schedule for the month of October, and I think a lot of the teams are in the same boat, is brutal just because they're trying to pack in as many games as they can, front load the start of the season because of that Olympic break. But, I just worry when I see the bottom six, and the hope that you get off to a fast start, and then you look at their schedule and the teams that they're facing. Now, okay, I mean, the Washington Capitals are going to be a good team. Then they've got the Blackhawks coming in and the Sabres coming in. Okay, let's hope. But then you've got the Lightning, Vegas, Colorado, the Preds, the Panthers, the Ducks. Again, I mean, Colorado. This is not an easy schedule for the month of October.
Right.
And if you get off to a slow and sluggish start, I don't see how, if you get off to a slow start, right, it's not impossible to turn it around. Right? Because the early predictors back in the day were, if you weren't in a playoff spot by US Thanksgiving, it was unlikely. I think that has been pushed out somewhat to more like, listen, if you're not in a playoff position by, January, then, maybe you're going to be on the outside looking in. And for me, in order for me to have a lot of hopefulness in terms of where this team is going to go, I think Jeremy Swayman is critically and crucially important to that, as is their defensive structure as a whole. This is what we're hearing, that they're going to be more defensively responsible, but that is going to start from the beginning with Jeremy Swayman. And, I don't know how many of these games he's going to play. They're on a lot of back-to-backs. But, Jonas Poitras made it pretty clear at the end of last season that he wanted to play more, and I think he should play more. I think he's capable. Yeah, I think he's capable. Right. Yeah. So, it's going to start from the back end of our house and work its way forward, because it's not going to start from the front end of the house, because, scoring is going to be likely at a premium with this team. And so not only am I going to be keeping my eye out on Jeremy Swayman, another player that I'm going to be setting my sights on is Mason Lohrei. I've got to see, like, he needs to focus on his defensive mindset. He has to focus on his defensive mindset.
He has to break some bad habits. I would say it's almost like this season, with that absurd contract that he landed, clearly the Bruins organization sees a lot of potential and skill and talent in this kid. And that's,
well, I think we all, in fairness to him, we all did. When he first jumped on the scene, there was a sense of, excitement and enthusiasm about the player. And then when Charlie McAvoy went down, he was holding his own. And then I'm not quite sure what happened, right?
I think ultimately he's had 2 seasons that could not have been any different. And these 2 seasons happened during arguably very formative times in his professional career. He starts his career under Jim Montgomery, whose approach was very much involving the defense in the offense, something that he is obviously very inclined to do. But he was inexperienced, so made mistakes, right? Then you pile on the second year and he hasn't necessarily addressed those mistakes or those issues, and then is thrown into a situation where he is all on his own without somebody to consistently provide structure and support and, education on how you handle this and this and this in the NHL. Because remember, he's still a really young kid. And I'm not saying this to, excuse his mistakes and things like that, but he is still learning how to be a full-time NHL player. And he's only got 2 years under his belt, 2 years that, again, very inconsistent in just the experience, right? So this is, again, a really big year for him in that hopefully there is a lot of consistency in his development and the messaging that he's receiving and the responsibilities that he's taking on, showing how he learns from his mistakes. It's not quite a reset for him, but his D partner and the Bruins coaching staff, they certainly have their work cut out for them. So,
And I'm not sure how they're going to. I'll be curious to see how they manage him because, clearly they want and need more offensive production from the back end, but understanding that can't be his Mason Lohrei's sole focus when he's out on the ice. He clearly has the offensive skill sets.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see how they try to strike that balance with his growth and development.
Yeah. And I think him having a full year partnered with Charlie McAvoy, because again, he didn't have that full year last year, right? We saw growth and improvement with him up until, that time when then Charlie was out and he didn't have that kind of solid partnership. And so I think it's going to be really good pairing for him. I think they're going to complement each other really well because, Chucky isn't that powerhouse offensive guy, right?
No,
That's why they put Lohrei with him. Lohrei wouldn't be, I don't think, a good partner for someone like Lindholm, who is a solid two-way defenseman, right? So, and he is too good to be in the third pairing. Doesn't mean he's too good for it if he screws up. I certainly hope to see, him relegated to where he needs to be. And if he's not picking up and learning from his idiotic mistakes, what I just hope doesn't happen is ultimately what happened like with Matt Grzelcyk, in that when he's good, he's good. And when he's bad, my God, is it a disaster?
Yeah.
Well, we've seen that a little bit already.
And you've made that comparison in the past, and I was co-signing it because, boy, when Mason Lohrei
threw his stick during a preseason game, you can't do that.
I know. I just
you do that, you idiot. You can't do that.
Those are two guys that I'm going to kind of focusing my attention on. The other one to me is, I'm still not sure what Tanner Jeannot is going to bring to the table for this team. I really don't. So, I'm likely going to be kind of zoning in or honing in on his contributions. Like, it's all well and good to say, great locker room guy. Okay, how is that going to translate on the
he
ice?
still needs to score 20 goals.
Right, when you need scoring or you need a defensive responsibilities, right? If you get a lead, right? Because this seems like the way, they're likely going to play. And I don't think it's going to be any big secret that the Bruins blueprint will likely be get a lead and try to protect it at all costs, right?
Although, funny enough, that's not how almost all of the preseason games went down. They all clawed their way back, which I love, right? I love that.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that in a while.
Well, no. I do like that aspect of it too, right? The don't give up factor. No, but then when you get the lead, right? When you get the lead, don't just turn around and give it back immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. I would say, I'm in agreement with you. I got to wait and see what Jeannot does. He didn't play a ton in the preseason.
No.
We certainly saw a lot more of Mikey Eismont, which I loved what I saw. He was where he needed to be. I think he,
he's a bit of a playmaker. I like what I saw out of him. And he doesn't seem to be too scared to shoot either. So
Yeah. So I agree. I'll be paying attention to Jeannot just to kind of get more of an understanding of really who he is as a player, how he fits on this team, what his job is, right? We don't know. It's very unclear still for us as fans. What is your job description? We know in theory, based on the literal position that you play on the line that you are assigned. So how are you making it yours? How are you specifically contributing when you're out there? Are you always going to be at the bumper? Is that your job? I don't know yet. I haven't seen him play.
Well, it's, and that might still be TBD for the coaching staff. It's going to be very interesting once the season gets going to see how Marco and the rest of the coaches manage or administrate the bottom six of that roster. Because I think there's a lot of interchangeable parts there.
Yeah. And they hit the road pretty early again, which I think didn't really happen last season. So that always helps with the team building and such.
Get the schedule up here because they're going to Anaheim already.
Yeah. And the increased number.
Oh no! So there, the week of the 13th. They will be in Vegas on the 16th.
Yeah.
Then they be in Colorado, and then Utah.
Yep.
And that Colorado, Utah, those are back-to-back games.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this schedule is not for the faint of heart for the first month of the season for the Boston Bruins. So they are going to be thrown into a lot of testing in the early part of the season. So that's a good segue into what is your prediction for the 2025-2026 Boston Bruins? No one's going to hold you to it.
Yes, they will. Oh my God. Maria, I have no idea. This is the most nebulous this team has been for me at this point in the year in a long time. I mean, ask me after the first 5 games, especially because games 2 and 3 against Chicago and Buffalo will tell me a lot, because last year they struggled so mightily.
The Sabres were so bad. And we kept saying, we can't possibly be as bad as the Sabres. Oh, yes, we were.
They said,
yes,
hold
we
my
were.
So I'll tell you next week, because honestly, I have no idea.
I'm gonna tell you today. I'm gonna tell you today.
You're braver.
I am brave. And I may be a little stupid. And maybe people will say you know nothing about hockey, which I'm sure they say already, but that's okay. Doesn't stop me from talking about it. I don't have this team making the playoffs this season.
Interesting.
I see signs and potential, but I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs this season.
If they can play all of their games in the way that they played all of their preseason games, I think they could make a wild card. I do. But the question is it sustainable? I don't know.
Well, and again, maybe, it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Will they be in contention for a wild card? Likely.
Yeah.
But I don't think they'll have enough to get over that hump because, whether people agree or not, you got to score goals in this league.
Yeah.
And that, to me, because we still are so uncertain as to where viable secondary scoring is going to come from, hence why I am saying what I am currently saying on October 6th. And, if I have to walk it back and eat crow in April, I will.
Yeah. My one area of concern is, how sustainable is it to consistently rely on someone, whether it was the coach
can't be
or the
pasta
leadership,
and-
to say, okay, we're down going into the third. Someone has to light it up again, whether it's, the motivational speech at the bench. Like, I don't know what that magic thing was that we saw happen in these preseason games where it was like all of a sudden there was a massive increase in the shots on goal. I don't know who said what or who did what. But is that, if that's what every game has to come down to, can you do that 82 times? I
don't know.
Would imagine not.
No. Well, and I mean, in fairness to them, I'm not sure that any team can do that 82 times, right?
I mean, literally the only way you can win.
Right.
You have to have diversity in the way that you win. Because you can't rely on the same thing every time. Not every team is
and you
the same
can't. I mean, and that's a lot to put, in my view. That's a lot to put on the shoulders of Pasta and Geeky. And I think there are a lot of guys on this roster who understand their contribution has to be elevated this season, and I'm talking about Elias Lindholm and Pavel Zacha in particular. Okay,
hey,
those
he had
guys,
an open net and he didn't miss. So, swear to God, the last.
That's where we're going with this,
it's
right?
broadside of a barn.
Ay, Jesus. So, so we're excited. The Bruins open up on the road on Wednesday, October 8th, against the Washington Capitals. That game will be on TNT. That's a national game. And then their home opener will be on Thursday night, October, getting my dates, 9th, against the Blackhawks.
Yep.
But before we wrap things up, I had alluded to some very big news that the Bruins had announced and posted right before we started recording our podcast. And that is that Zdeno Chara's number 33 is going to be raised to the rafters on January 15th, which is a Thursday night game at 7:00. To which I say, congratulations, Big Z. Well deserved. Long time in coming. I'm not quite sure why it took this long to get there, but he's there. And to me, when the Bruins signed Chara as a free agent, and there have been a small number actually, of athletes in Boston who have been responsible for changing the culture and the direction of the pro franchise. And I would put Zdeno Chara in that bucket along with Kevin Garnett when he signed with the Boston Celtics as a free agent, and when the Red Sox made the deal for David Ortiz. I think those were, those guys are, along with Tom Brady, even though he was drafted here, those guys are Mount Rushmore of New England sports, in my view. So I think it's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. My initial reaction, about damn time.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame this November. And I think that they also were aware of the fact that, he works for them again. He's going into the Hall in November. They need to retire him before they can retire number 37, who will be eligible on the ballot in June of 2026. And I mean, unless something absolutely obscene happens, that man is also a first ballot.
Yeah. No. I mean, he was, yes. Right. There's, I can't even imagine that anyone who has a vote, an NHL, writer who has a vote, would not have Bergeron. Yeah, hands down. Yeah. But this is, Big Z's moment. Well deserved, and so many iconic moments, with Zdeno Chara, not the least of which was, watching him hoist that Stanley Cup over his head. I don't know if that Stanley Cup has ever been hoisted that high again, or watching him take the ice after he basically shattered his jaw. Right? Comes out with all the the mouth gear and everything on to play that game. I mean, and a class act. Just always a class act, and has made no bones about the fact that he considers, New England and Boston his home. His kids have been raised here. They go to school here. So, congratulations to Zdeno and his family.
And the last piece of housekeeping, because the season does start this week, that means on your audio listening devices, our snapshots are going to be back. So I believe our first snapshot's going to be out on Friday. So make sure you tune in.
Good stuff. Hopefully they won't give me anything to be screaming and yelling about early on in the season. So thank you all for listening, watching, and absorbing our content. Please be sure to like us, subscribe to us, help support our pod by signing up for a Patreon membership. You can find us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, Substack, any place you get your content, you can find us. So, in closing, can't wait for Wednesday night.
Yay!
And you get the floor to finish us off with,
as always, go Bees!
Go Bees!